Okay, so the Edinburgh the Edinburgh Comedy Festival, is called the Fringe Festival. The Fringe Festival was born of a huge arts festival which was exclusively for dance and theatre. It was very, very sort of prestigious. And the word fringe comes from them setting up their own smaller festival to try and sort of showcase other talent outside of that. Comedy was obviously one of the big things. So originally it was poetry, comedy, sort of small plays. But now the Fringe has outgrown the original festival by quite a long way. So it's still called the Fringe, but it's one of the largest arts festivals in the whole world. Mm-hmm. And the sort of lie they tell you or they sell you is, oh, if you come to the Edinburgh Fringe and you do your show, then you will be discovered and you will fly off and all of a sudden go to be one of the biggest arts performers in the world. But unfortunately, that is really not the case. And even the people who've been discovered there over the years, there are very, very few things coming out now that were actually discovered at the Edinburgh Festival. Because, of course, in a pre-internet age, when agents, booking agents, talent agents needed to see someone, they had to go to a physical festival.
Yeah.
Now you can just look on the internet. It's not needed anymore. Yeah. And you've got the full thing. You know, everyone's got their online thing. I will just say this. It is one of the funnest experiences you're ever going to have as a performer because all you will have to worry about all day is performing. So usually you do your hour show, and then during the day you do little 10-minute spots at group shows to advertise your shows. Yeah. So if you play it well, you can do 7 or 8 shows a day.
Holy cow, fella.
As well as there's chat shows, compilation shows, there's the late night say what you want rude shows, you know, all sorts of things. So you can really get busy. The only thing is, it's one of these setups where the machinery that runs it all makes literally millions upon millions of pounds every year. Yeah. So the people who book the venues, the people who hire accommodation, the people who do the flyering, the people who do the you have the big listings. You have to be in the listings if you want to perform, and it costs £500 just to get in the listings. And of course, the listings is a giant book. Yeah, it's like a phone book full of people trying to do shows. And you have to pay for your venue. You have to pay for flyering. You have to pay for advertising. So if you want to do a very, very basic run in a terrible pub at lunchtime, I mean, the least you're going to spend is probably £8,000 to £10,000.
That's unreal.
It is absolutely unbelievable. And as I said, I think a lot of new people do their first hour and do it very, very badly. Yeah. They're very unprepared to come in and actually do it. And they don't understand the systems. They don't understand how to advertise the show. They don't understand how to get people to the show. They've booked a venue that's 25 minutes walk from the main stretch. Yeah. So they get 2 people in every day for the month, and they've spent, £10,000 of their hard-earned money doing it.
Well, and that is, right, an interesting component of how this all has come together now. Because what people are going to, wonder when they see the podcast, Nathan, why do you have some random British man on your podcast right now? And the answer to this is well, I have engaged this man that you see before you in the art of content creation, and I'm hearing you kind of talk about this really makes me in this moment start to comprehend what value we've been able to provide for you over the years.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, because the reason I first started coming to America on tour...
Wait.
Oh, we're not there yet.
Hold on.
Okay.
We'll do the breakaway cut for the introduction to episode 107 of the WTF Carbondale podcast, where we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives and tie it all back to this little old place we call home, Carbondale, Illinois. And this one, folks out there in internet land... This one's for me because it is with my good buddy, Sam Rhodes.
Yes, hello. A pleasure. Beautiful to be here in one of my favorite towns in all of America.
In all of America.
I really love it here.
Oh, schmooze me, baby. Schmooze me.
That's right.
So let's go through the story of how you first came to America, and then how you first came to the Midwest, and then how you first came to Carbondale, and how now you are back for... God, this is the third time.
This is the third trip, yeah.
This is insane.
Yeah, it's really cool. It all ties to the Edinburgh Festival. That's why I'm banging on about the Edinburgh Festival. Basically, I came from the DIY music scene. Yeah. And my attitude was always very much like, don't wait for people to give you things.
Yeah.
No one with a giant cigar is going to turn up at your little Edinburgh show and go, wow, you've really got what it takes, kid. I'm going to make you a millionaire. It just doesn't. I don't think it ever happened like that, but it especially doesn't happen like that now.
Yeah.
So when I was looking at hedging my first Edinburgh run, I'd already made a special for the BBC.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, right, I've got a bit of clout. I've got a bit of something going on. I could spend all of this money to play in a terrible pub at lunchtime, or I could look at other options. So what I did, instead of playing in a terrible pub at lunchtime, I used the money that I would have spent going to the Edinburgh Festival to live in New York for a month.
Yeah.
And what I did while I was in New York is I booked myself a load of shows and I played all the open mics and I just went out and kind of connected with people. I got to know people. I got scammed by a couple of guys, of course, because I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Ain't that the truth?
A couple of guys who said I'd put you on the big shows and I paid them some money and then the shows didn't appear. But, you live and learn.
Yeah.
But I met some guys on that first trip. I did something like, I think I did 35 shows in 27 days or something ridiculous like that, as well as a couple of additional open mics. And through that, I met a guy who said, right, you can come back here next year, or we can go somewhere else and you can earn some money. And he was actually the guy who first sorted me out a couple of shows in the Midwest. Now, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, which is really bad. He did kind of screw me over a little bit, as is often the case. A few of the shows came off, a few of the shows didn't.
Yeah.
As I said, I parted with a little bit of money, which I've learned not to do anymore.
Well, and it's interesting talking about this component, right? Because it is something that I didn't realize, again, until now in our conversation, where that bond comes from. And there is a special kind of bond amongst people who are trying to do something, right, to benefit themselves and a greater world around them, when those people have themselves been burned by the world around them, right, and people within that world. And so you work well with people who you also see as people who have taken that flack and learned that tough lesson.
Yeah,
they've been
definitely.
grifted, they've been scammed, they've been railroaded, however you refer to it, right?
Yeah, I think you only learn from doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you can either be bitter about it or you can either do it. And I always say, fortune favors the brave.
Yeah.
So sometimes you take a risk, it doesn't work out. But I would say, I know it sounds like I've just been wandering around America being scammed, but I would say, 95 times out of 100, it's been very beneficial and very, very good.
Yeah.
And he said, this guy was like, come to the Midwest. There's a lot of shows to do. There's a lot of clubs. There's a lot of driving to do. And unlike New York, they'll actually pay for shows. So this is now my third tour of the Midwest. So it's the fourth tour in total, but the third tour. And I just found a real spiritual home when I came here. It's just a very, very different environment to the sort of environment I'm used to. And I find the people immensely welcoming. Everyone's very interested in getting to know me and learning about where I'm from, which is very interesting. Unfortunately, everybody I meet likes to do my accent back at me without fail. That just happens every day of my life when I'm here. But I don't really mind because it's fun, and they're enjoying it.
Yeah.
The only thing that's annoying, I was in a cafe ordering some lunch the other day, and the woman said to me, "Oh, what would you like to drink with your dinner?" And I said, "Oh, I'll just have a bottle of water, please." And the server went, "Oh, water!" And I was like, I'm all right with it, but, not in a professional setting, please,
Like, may I just have my bottle of water and it be okay?
Yeah, without having to literally do a song and dance about it, But yeah, I genuinely love coming here. I love the theatres we've played because I did the Varsity the first time, didn't I? And then we filmed the first special at the Varsity the second time.
Yep.
And I enjoyed those shows so much, and it was just one of the most beautiful theatres I've played in, really. And to come back this time and play the Liberty Theatre, which is another absolutely gorgeous space, I just couldn't be happier with it. And to be entirely honest, when you come from a big city, you associate small town things with small town operations, but this is one of the most professionally run sort of setups I've encountered. Everybody here knows what they're doing. The work has been easy and fun, which is always a blessing, because quite often you can, oh man, when there's a time limit and there's a lot of tech stuff needs doing, people can get very antsy, people can get very angry, and it can make that a difficult job. But this was the opposite of a difficult job. It was just roll up, everything was set and ready, everything was good to go. Everybody knew exactly what they were doing, and I was having a little look at some edit yesterday, and it's already looking absolutely magnificent. I just can't wait to see the whole thing together.
And this is right. You have given us the opportunity to kind of work through the proving functions of we can do this, right? Because just as much as the media that we're making with you is something that can put you on the map, it's just as big a potential to put us and our production activity on the map as well.
Oh, definitely. And with the spaces you have and the equipment you have, there's no reason at all why you couldn't get much bigger acts than me coming through and shooting.
Well,
some
stuff and that's part of the question, right? Is like, is there a place for growth through not just bringing people from the ground up, but bringing people from up down to the ground, so they can really feel this energy that is not staged, right? You can't, we had what, like 50 or so people at the show Saturday night, and you can't stage the energy of those 50 people the way that...
Yeah, and I think I was so happy that the crowd was so into it, because I think this is something that's really going to come across in the recording.
Yeah.
And once again, just the room itself has this beautiful kind of acoustic, old-fashioned theatre sound to it. So those 50 people sound like 100 people. So it's going to be really good. I actually have some suggestions of how I think you could really make this a place where bigger people could come through. What I would say is make sure you have a comedy show at the same time every month, so that people know they're getting it. Different acts every month. Look at surrounding towns and try and line up a comedy show that would make it easier for people to drive an hour and a half a day and do a comedy show. So rather than just it being, this is the town and we do this, you need to speak to the towns an hour and a half either side and 3 hours either side. Yep. And you need to say, if you do a show on Wednesday, first Wednesday of the month, and then the next town does a show first Thursday of the month, next town does a show first Friday of the month, last town does a show first Saturday of the month, you've got a full ready-packed tour ready to go there that would make it very, very easy for performers to come on through. Yeah. Because that is often that when you do a long tour like this, that is often the problem. The amount of driving offsets the amount of money you make. Yeah. So if you make some money, you've then got to factor in... Luckily, hotels are usually included, but you've got to factor in petrol and eating.
Well, and that's clever in that sense, right? Of reducing the stops between performances.
Definitely,
right? Reducing the space, and the way that I pitch Carbondale and our surrounding area to folks is as that routing gig space, right? We've got Chicago, we've got St. Louis, we've got Nashville, we've got Memphis. If you really stretch it, we've got Atlanta, 8 hours, right? There is Indianapolis, 5 hours within stops, right? Yeah. Building a constellation of points, right? There is an abundance of space, and everywhere in between, right? The hour-long drives from Cape Girardeau, Paducah, Effingham.
Yes.
Say it correctly for me.
Effingham.
Thank you. No. Effingham. Like your correct way, not
Effingham,
not the Americanized way. My apologies. I didn't mean to back you in the corner and be like, say it in American.
Yeah, Effingham. Yeah.
And I don't remember everything about the first show that we booked together outside of we got introduced by another person in the comedy world. Things didn't work out there on our end with that person, but it worked out between us, and that's where exactly we can thank that person for their value.
And you see, that's where those scammers come in handy, because sometimes you bump into the right people, Because on the very first tour that I came through, I met Bradley, who has helped me. He helped me organize the second tour. He's put some stuff together for this one, and it's just making sure you make connections. And I tell comedians all the time, if you're the comedian who does his show, then sits in the back and reads a book and doesn't speak to anyone.
Hey, hold on one second. This camera has frozen, so I'm going to reset it real quick. So yeah, just go ahead and jump back in about meeting Bradley and starting to organize your second Midwest tour from him after meeting him.
Yeah. So on the first tour, I met Bradley when I was my first Midwestern tour, and he just was amazing. He helped me sort a load of stuff out, and through him, I ended up booking some venues where I bumped into more people, and I've ended up with this beautiful network of guys who are just ready to help out.
Yeah.
And I say to every comedian that I ever meet, do not be the guy who turns up and does the show and then fucks off.
Yeah.
Because the networking is 90% of the game.
Oh, absolutely.
Going to that party or hanging out for those couple of hours afterwards, and also just making yourself accessible. I mean, I'm a big wrestling fan, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't perform under my real name.
Yeah.
So I kind of have this weird thing. If you meet Sam Rhodes at one of his shows, you are meeting Sam Rhodes and you are getting the full Sam Rhodes experience. So even if I'm grumpy and I've got a headache and I'm feeling a bit shit, that is never, ever shown to the people that I'm meeting, because I want everybody who meets me to go away going, oh, yeah, he's fun. You know, that was a fun experience. And I want to be a story for people, you know. And I love having a collection of Facebook friends that I will never, ever see again. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But it's just brilliant fun.
Yeah, that concept of wanting to be a story for people.
Yeah.
Right? Like just that break-in moment. Like you are a punctuation mark.
Yeah.
Right?
You know,
in the midst of somebody's life.
Exactly. And I want them to think like, oh, that was a cool thing that kind of happened. And I made a friend, you know. And it's why I never say, I won't say never, because sometimes I get offered some really sketchy things. But I very rarely say no to the opportunity to go and hang out, you know. And it's not that I'm looking for performance opportunities. A, I just love hanging out and meeting new people. It's one of my favorite things. And B, even guys who maybe aren't in the industry and things like this, you can get to know someone who knows someone through those guys. Yeah. So it's great to fill the evenings and have a load of fun, but it's also always beneficial, you know.
Well, and this is where it ties into some more Carbondale stuff for me here. And you said it at the top of the podcast, right? This concept of DIY, right? That you have to build it yourself, right? Whether it's the physical function of the show, it's the scene, it's whatever it is. And that is, I think, a thing that you may not quite understand yet, is something that ties you very deeply to Carbondale, but that is the thing that
definitely.
Carbondale is, right? And you got to experience that firsthand Saturday night after the show.
Yes, because we went down to, what's it called? The Cross House?
Lost Cross.
The Lost Cross, yes. That place was amazing. I really, really liked that. It kind of reminded me, have you seen that horror movie, Green Room?
I'm not a horror movie
Green
person.
Room is a horror movie about a punk band that get murdered when they go to play a punk show.
That's hilarious.
It's a brilliant movie if you get a chance to see it. But the vibe in there was amazing, because it just felt like something that no one has policed that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It feels like they've set that up in like 1979 and everyone's just gone...
83, close enough.
Oh, right? 83. Okay, that was a pretty good guess there. I'm happy with that. And everyone's just gone, whatever. You know, it's just the kids, man. It's the kids. And that's something nice about small towns. Like a little thing like that would just not be allowed where I'm from, because A, it would be way too busy in the local community that you'd get away with having music at 3 a.m. And B, you know, you'd get lawsuits. You'd get all sorts of stuff going on. That would get shut down as soon as it started, I think.
Well, I mean, and the cool part of it is it's really just a house. People live there.
They live there.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I think it's McKinnon and Grant right now, but it's been, you know, a collection of people through the years, like, that has just been handed off. Yeah. Person to person, people to people, and like sometimes it's, you know, really going. Sometimes in more recent years it's slowed down. I mean, obviously pandemic and what have you, but it's always there. And now more than ever, right, now that you've got multiple generations across scenes that have all been to that venue together. Yeah. So like I'm really glad that you got to experience that.
I was very, very impressed with it. I thought it was really cool. Yeah. I'd like to send a message to the people who live there. Maybe do a bit of hoovering. Just a tiny bit of hoovering. If you're going to have guests over, maybe do a bit of hoovering. That's all I'd say. But other than that...
You didn't take your shoes off, did you?
Oh, God, no. But yeah, I was very impressed with it. I thought it was a real cool thing, and it really felt felt very tied to the local community, obviously.
Yeah.
And also a bit of a haven for all of the kind of oddbods and weirdos, which is exactly the sort of person that I consider myself. So I was like, right, yeah.
Hello, my people.
Hello, yeah, that's it. These are all my guys. And there was a fist fight as we were going home outside as well. So I was like, good, I've got the full experience. And it reminds me of home, you know.
Just a little after pub brawl, nothing too crazy.
There was a saying in the 70s, which has kind of gone away a bit now, which was, a pint and a fight, a great British night. And that's yeah. So yeah, they really got the punk scene thing down with the fist fight at the end as well.
Marshall told me that that little the little get together, and he had to like walk off with his buddy and what have you. It probably sounds crazier than
oh yeah, it was just a tiny bit of fisticuffs, you know. Some old-fashioned dispute solving, you know.
It's 2 a.m. and this yelling isn't working.
That's it.
Well, and then like the music side of things, right? Because you've got all the different talents, and you got a chance to, after the first special that we shot, play the drums at PK's when Jimmy Beers hands you some sticks over to get in
love
your.
it, yeah. Well, I was in the music industry for years before I was a comedian, and I still secretly love it, you know. And whenever I get a chance to sit in with someone and play, I do. I've got a lovely set of videos of me all around the world. Whenever I do a foreign tour, I try and find a street musician and see if he's all right with letting me play. And I've got me playing in about 10 different countries.
That's
kind of recorded, just playing some drums on the streets and stuff. So I love it. And, you know, I think music's one of those things that almost everybody likes music.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a really good way just to get to know people again, you know, and it's a real, playing music with people is great. I mean, I was down at Greg's last night. His house is amazing because there was 3 old dudes there, and it's like a dorm room for 50-year-old men. It's brilliant. And I just love the vibe. It was like being, you know, in a Grateful Dead tour bus. I enjoyed it immensely. And we went and jammed for a good sort of hour, and it was just like super duper fun.
Yeah.
And the guys were great, cooked a barbecue. It was brilliant. What more could you want?
I mean, and it's just so very Carbondale. And it's not to say that people and places don't have music all over the world, right? That there aren't places to go do things in different ways. It's just there's something just a little bit about this place that, like...
Yeah, and also just the space, as I said, the space around each house that means we could play music at 11 at night. That's not a luxury that's afforded to many people who live in big cities, you know. So it's really lovely. And as I said, I just think, like, Greg is amazing. Greg is a really hard-working, interesting guy. You know, I think pretty much everyone I've met in the Midwest, they really are like lifelong friends, you know. And I get as excited to come back and see everyone as I do to actually come and play, because, you know, I just really like hanging out with all you guys. You know, it's really good fun.
Well, eventually one of these things will kick over. You'll get famous enough that old man with the cigar will show up and go, "You want to be famous and rich, kid? Come on with me." And you know, maybe these little vacations will be a little bit nicer, or a little bit more, you know, just accessible as is. You won't have to worry about gambling your money away in Vegas.
That's right. Well, I feel like everyone I've done has been better for earning and better planned. So every year it gets a little bit easier, it gets a little bit better to do. I think my only problem with this particular tour is I haven't worked myself a day off into it at all.
Oh,
so
no, you're just...
I'm already 3 and a bit weeks in with a week and a half to go, and I am absolutely spent.
Well, hopefully you get a chance to sleep this evening.
Yes,
and turn it over into...
I'm sure you've experienced this, but when you travel a lot, and I think it's something to do with your.
I'm gonna tell you a secret, Sam. I don't get out very much.
Travel ever, yeah.
But I don't think
okay, I'll say this like a wise old man.
Thank you.
If you travel a lot, no, I won't. If you travel a lot, the first night in any new place is always the hardest, because your brain doesn't switch all the way off, because we have this weird defensive mode that our body does when we're in new environments, where we're obviously looking out for dangers which don't exist anymore. But so
psych, you're in America. They're everywhere.
Oh yeah. So my advice to anyone who wants to do a lot of traveling, if you can get 2 consecutive days in one hotel, that makes a huge difference to actually getting a good night's sleep. Because even the comfiest hotels, if I'm only there for one night, I toss and turn all night. You know, I wake up 2 or 3 times in the night, and I feel all right, like I can carry on, but I don't feel like rested, you know. And I don't mind, because I'm working, you know, I'm out on tour, so it's fine. But it can get very hard, and when you have to get up, like we did 2 days in a row with a 9-hour drive each day. We had to get up at 6 a.m, 2 days in a row, and that was so tiring. That was just unbelievably tiring. And the day after that, we had another show that was 4 hours away, and I was like, oh God, I don't know if I can physically force myself back into this car, but I'm managing it. And the thing is, when I get to the show, I'm full of energy again, of course. I get a couple of beers in me, and I'm good to go,
That show energy just there. I mean, you could, if you could bottle show energy drink it.
Well, I've said a lot. I understand why. I mean, I've never done cocaine in my life, but I understand why so many comedians do cocaine, because that is what it is. It's your show adrenaline as a gift. Your show adrenaline that you can sniff up your nose. And I think, especially touring guys, I think that's why the coke is such a prominent thing. I cannot imagine touring completely sober, because if I couldn't drink and release a bit of steam in the evenings, I don't know what I'd do. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and alcohol culturally is just such a woven part of
big time. Yeah.
That is shared across
And if you're sitting at the bar, you've got to do something, haven't you?
Yeah, right? I'm going to sit here and what are we going to drink? Water?
Exactly.
No, I'm going to drink water, but everybody else, no? It's just because I'm a square and the diabetes. Neither here nor there. The travel. What has the travel been like? Because you've been all over, but has it always been performing, or do you get to do a little travel just for leisure as
Yeah, there's bits and pieces. I mean, I always used to laugh because I used to see this interview there's a brilliant interview with Bon Jovi, which is done in a hotel in Dubai. And behind him, there's like literally elephants in golden helmets wandering past. There's a beautiful fountain. There's like an array of men and women in very extravagant clothes. And that's the background of this interview. And the interviewer says to Bon Jovi, like, what is the worst thing about touring? He says, well, the worst thing about touring is you don't really get to see the world. And I'm like, turn around, mate. It's all just, it's literally right behind you, But now I actually travel a bit.
Yeah.
I do kind of see that a little bit, because I would love to have a day in every town I go to where I can catch all the local stuff. I've been obsessed with this muddy monster in the Sasquatch, one of the Sasquatches.
It's a shame that all the statues are the opposite direction of the direction you have to drive to get to.
Yeah, because I would love to, for example, spend a day here and just talk to some people about that. Maybe kind of film a little documentary about this muddy monster and who he is and what he means to people, I had an idea for a children's television, like Saturday morning cartoon, which is about...
Muddy Monster Mornings.
Well, I was thinking it's Sasquatch building a super team of all the other Sasquatches. So
the Yeti shows up, the big muddy monster.
There's the muddy monster. There's a golden-eyed one about 3 hours down the road from here. There's a fine selection of Sasquatch that he can pull from. So I just had this dream that it's like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I want to call it the Sasquatchman.
That's pretty good. I'll buy Sasquatchman. I'm in on that.
You're in for an investment with that one, yeah. But yeah, I as I said, I do wish I could sort of see a few more of the things, but I genuinely love it. And even just things like little junk shops, little antique shops.
Yeah.
I adore them because they're so different from.
Which reminds me that I got to get the little table back to the antique shop across the street in Murfreesboro. Yes. Thank you for that reminder. Don't go on me now, Sam.
That's it. All right. I'm holding up.
You performed in Russia before Russia went full
crazy. Yeah.
God, what did you where did you feel that common thread of comedy was, and where did you feel it there was a disconnect?
That's a real good question. Russia is a fascinating place to visit because the two big metropolitan cities, so St. Petersburg and Moscow, are enormous.
Yeah.
They're huge, and they are so unbelievably westernized. When I first went to Russia, I was expecting guys in furry hats whittling little knives in the train station and just snow for miles. But I mean, Moscow and St. Pete's feel like cities in Germany. Like the architecture, the attitude of people, all the young people there since the fall of the wall, they've grown up with American films, British films. They have all the same media influences, all the same computer games. There's still obviously smaller towns in Russia which are much more insular and get hit by the sort of propaganda a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, unfortunately, a lot of Russians just have to stomach the fact they live in a very oppressive place.
Yeah.
But, you know, some of my gay friends, for example, were very upset that I would go and visit Russia so regularly because of their bad history with homophobia and imprisoning gay people, killing gay people.
Yeah.
But when you go to the big cities, man, they are trying. And what I try and say to people is, you got to bear in mind that we in England have had legalized homosexuality since the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And in Russia, you're talking less than 10 years since they literally made it not a criminal offense anymore.
Yeah.
So the young people, they're all moving in the right direction with that sort of thing. But obviously, they're a couple of years behind, you know.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're obviously going to get your extremists and your more horrible people. But in my experience of the big cities, they're just not there in the big cities, you know. Especially in St. Petersburg, there was, even this visit compared to the last visit, I saw a lot more openly gay couples, you know, and that's just in a few years. And that's because attitudes have changed and moved for the better. The thing I worry about most with Russia is that it spent all this time becoming a completely different country from Soviet Union times. And then, of course, in 3 months, it's plunged straight back to it, you know. And, you know, all of these sanctions and stuff, they are good because they are going to eventually stop the war.
Mm-hmm.
But who's getting punished right now? It's not Putin.
Yeah.
You know, it's the poor people who are literally just pawns in the game.
Yeah.
And I feel terrible about it because I was actually out in Russia about 2 months before the war broke out.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw the mobilization from Moscow. They were putting the soldiers on the train in Moscow to send them to the Ukrainian border. And me and my friend I was with were laughing because we were saying, oh, you know, this isn't an army. This is a Boy Scout troop. This is, you know, these boys, they literally all look like 15, 16 because they still have mandatory conscription over there. So, you know, you're just pulled from your tiny Russian village at 17, 18 years old. And now all of a sudden you're told to kill someone who speaks your language, looks like you, lives in a street that looks exactly like yours, you know. And I know exactly why the Russian army's done so badly. It's because the morale of that army must be fucking terrible. Like genuinely terrible. And you hear all these stories about whole platoons turning on their generals and stuff. And, you know, it's really funny because I've got a lot of experience in Russia. I've got a lot of close ties with Russian people. And especially in America, I meet people who go, yeah, but Putin's doing the right thing. I'm like, literally not a single person. Like, so few people in Russia think Putin's doing the right thing. And obviously zero people in the Ukraine think he's doing the right thing, you know. And it's all to do with his weird boner for bringing the USSR back before he dies, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later, you know. But it pained me because all of my intelligent friends, all of my friends who had luckily a bit of money saved, they were able to get out because they saw what happened. You know, the amount of people I know. I mean, my Russian network has disappeared because all the artists, all the musicians, all the comedians, every single one of them, as soon as the war broke out, just upsticked and left because. You know, not just because they disagree with it, but also because quite a lot of them were openly anti-Putin and in public environments. So they're kind of then forced to flee effectively because if you're openly anti-Putin, you just get black-bagged and stuck in a gulag or, you know, arrested. They're straight back to the secret police being out and about. They closed all of the channels except the main government-funded channels. So all the comedy shows stopped. Anything that isn't propaganda is not on the television right now. And of course, all the streaming services have gone. You know, they've all just gone because you can't do it. And it's bad for them now. But in 5 years' time, for example, things like computer chips for new phones, new televisions, Russia doesn't produce any of this stuff, and their entire pipeline is damaged and gone. And like many countries, even for their food, their electricity, their gas, they're relying on amounts of those from other places. You know. So there's been reports of people like robbing each other for tech. Because if you've managed to get one of the last new phones before they've shut everything down, that's probably one of the last new phones they're ever going to see. You know, it's going to be, you know, using old stuff. So, you know, even cars, just basic stuff like cars and transport, you know. Because even a car that's assembled in Russia, all the parts come from all different countries. So
I mean, that's what makes this kind of war, right, very, very different than wars prior. Is we've now established this globalized economy,
without a doubt,
right, where everything is interdependent on one another. And there are some power players that get to make some calls, right? Welcome to America.
Yeah.
Right. But there's the reality of, a disruption of this is a disruption of everything people have come to understand about living.
Very, very
right,
much
in the past
so, yeah.
50, 60 years.
And the weirdest thing is, of course, you don't even realize how much of this stuff you rely on every day, because we're in a very lucky position where we want for absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Do you know what I mean? And the idea that one supply chain upset can change that. Like, weird things have now started happening because we've done Brexit and there's a Russian war. So we've really, really fucked ourselves over. But like the other day, you couldn't get any tomatoes anywhere. Just for like 3 days, the whole tomato supply chain was gone. And everyone was complaining mildly about that. And I was like, that's just tomatoes. Imagine if, like, I don't know, dairy or the main vegetable supplies or flour, something like this goes down. And we're very spoilt because we don't even see it.
Yep.
And it's why I find people who are strongly nationalistic to be, I think they're a relic of the past. Because now the internet exists, I can work for any company anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
We're moving towards the global community, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Brexit's one of the worst decisions that any country has ever made.
Yeah.
And it's why pushing away immigrants or pushing away, trying to hold on to this forgotten ancient national identity, be it American, Russian, British, I think it's a bad idea. I think it's an increasingly bad idea, Where you're born is no more important than what colour eyes you have or something like that, and the fact that people hold it in such high esteem, I always find to be a little bit kind of interesting because, you're the man you make yourself and other people see you as. You're not the place you're born, And, I just think nationalism is a dangerous thing more than it's a good thing usually.
Well, and that is ever true in a modern moment across, the entire world, right? And the question is, right, do people proclaim this because of some concept of superiority? Do they claim it because of some concept of protectionism? Do they claim it because they can't step out of the box that is themselves and see this interconnection of good for me, good for others, good for all, right?
Well, it's the Star Trek thing, isn't it? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Yeah.
the Vulcan creed, yeah. But
sorry, I'm not a Star Trek.
Yeah, but the thing I found the most is that the people most afraid of immigrants or foreigners are the people who never meet them. So whenever I go to countries and I'm in a small town, they're the people who say to me, "Oh, I hear you've got a lot of Muslims in London." Do you know what I mean? They're the guys who are like, "Oh, I've heard you've got to be wary of them." And I'm like, in my experience, they're freaking lovely.
Yeah.
Because we've got an exceptionally integrated. It's exactly the same in England. It's never the big cities, London, Manchester, Liverpool, who vote against, immigration stuff. It's always the people in fucking arse end of nowhere, Leighton Buzzard. They're like, "Oh no, we don't want any of them. We don't want any of them other people here, thank you. We've got quite enough people with me and my 5 brothers." And as well, I think it was here I met someone in a pub and he said a similar thing. "Oh, you have a lot of trouble with immigration, black people and Muslims in England." And I said, "No, and if anything, you should embrace them because, a lot of your towns around here are dying. There's not enough people." And he was like, "America is full." And he unironically said this in a pub that was just in the middle of a giant field with absolutely nothing in it. And I didn't want to say to him, like, just have a little look out there. Imagine, we could fit a whole little town just here and it would affect you not a jot. Do you know what I mean? Like,
everybody would just leave you alone and do good things to make your life better around you.
And I think a lot of this sort of insular thought is bad for people, but people are people at the end of the day, and the little group that you're born and raised in, it's very, very hard to change your opinion from that group quite often, And I always say about America and Russia have so much in common because in America, people say to me, "Oh, all that Russian propaganda though, it's awful, isn't it?" And then a soldier walks past and they stand up and salute him, and obviously that's good because those people have done their service and they deserve it. But I see exactly the same thing in America and in Russia and in the UK. It's there as well because we've got a king and queen that shouldn't be there, that people blindly stand up and clap for. Do you know what I mean? So
what do you think happens when Queen Elizabeth. Is Elizabeth?
Yeah,
passes
I
away.
can't stand her. Well, they have you always when a queen or king dies, you have the next person is instantly queen or king. There's not a period
no ceremony,
of debate.
there's no-
Yeah, because if there's a period of debate, some clever person will go, "Hey, why do we need a king or queen anyway?"
That's right.
So they get rid of them. Yeah, but Charles is going to take over. A lot of people hope that he abdicates and William is given the king, but Charles has had to wait his whole life, so I think he's going to be king for a little bit at least.
His
Yeah,
absolute entire life. Well, and the question is there some point of dissolution in the next 100 years that gets reached, and people say, why monarchy?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing for me is it is baffling.
Yeah.
The argument I usually say to people is, if a new country was founded today, would they choose a king or queen?
Yeah.
As the way to run their country? And I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
Because it is archaic, it is not correct. I don't believe in, divine right. There's no way that you're just born better than me. You have to kind of prove that you are better than me, And, the biggest reason I think most Brits support the monarchy is just because it's always been there.
Yeah.
But I always say to people, like, just because we've always done something, that's literally the worst reason why we should do something.
Yeah.
We should, every couple of generations, we need to have a little look at what's going on and why we still do these things. And I think amongst young people, there's definitely a rise in an anti-monarchy feeling. But if you ask anyone probably 50 and older, I'd say you're looking at a 90% support rate, like really, really high.
Yeah.
So I think...
And it's all subsidized by the people.
Well, we pay millions and millions and millions of pounds a year to the Queen, who is the richest landowner in the country. She is worth millions of pounds, and we give her, I think, her new pay, because she gets a pay rise every year, the Queen. This is because it's part of being the Queen, but she's been the monarch longer than anyone else. Her pay rise this year, not her pay rise this year was £30 million. And that is
She
money
got
that
30
we
million
pay.
more pounds.
Money, yes. And literally, she has enough money and land. She owns something like 20% of the country or some ridiculous amount like that.
That's unbelievable. Like just a single family owns.
So all the parkland.
And this is not accountable to anybody in any way, shape, or form.
No. And of course, because of their status, there's lots of tax breaks and stuff for royal members. And the most ironic thing, of course, is the Queen spends effectively zero money because she doesn't ever need to spend money because she's the Queen. So everything is sorted out for her. So they just amass money like Smaug on his pile of gold. They just.
Here's the deal, right? It's one thing in the American oligarchy of big business grabs their things and takes from the people, right, how they can through the system of government, because that's what businesses do. They're designed to look out for themselves and nothing more, and wedge whatever way they can to absorb that. That takes some kind of effort, right? The monarchy sounds like it's just there, like you say. It really
is, yeah. And the thing is, it's just been there so long, and the average person doesn't know how much money we spend on them every year. And the argument is always, but they're really good for tourism. People come to see the Queen, don't they? They come to see the Queen. And my argument back is always, do they not go and see the castles in France and Germany then? Do they not go there because there's no king or queen in there? Of course they bloody go there. We could even still have the trooping of the colour, the changing of the guard. We could have all that stuff without having to pay for the Queen to be there.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I'm a very staunch anti-monarchist. I actually wrote a death metal EP during lockdown, and it's called The Necessity of Regicide. And it's a death metal EP about how you've got to kill your monarchs because it's the only way to get rid of them. And the thing is, I wouldn't go around saying you should do that, but I definitely would say.
But it's a form of artistic expression.
Of course it is.
Right,
it's a very extreme.
Kill your monarch is a concept.
Yeah, exactly. I would never say it in real life.
Liberty.
Because what I sort of say is, I'm perfectly happy for us to follow the line and to put them on television, sell the mugs.
Yeah.
Just stop giving them our money.
Yeah.
Stop giving them our money.
Hell, even let them live off the dime, just pay for them to live, but that's a lot cheaper than actually giving them all this money or allowing them to own physically 20% of the country's land.
Well, as I said, every major parkland, everything like that, it all belongs to the king or queen. they have something called the Crown Acquisition Service, which is a huge building in London whose job it is just to invest the Queen's money in things like art, just so that they make more money on the money they've got. It's a whole thing. And I'm like, all that needs to go because it's just hoarded wealth.
Yeah.
It's,
And if you're like, here's the deal. If you are going to do it, take all that money, put it into that, and then pay it back to the people.
Yes.
Right? If you're going to invest in these things,
but it's not paid back to the people. It's paid straight to the Crown, and they just take more and more and more money.
Yeah.
And the thing is, every year at the opening of Parliament, the Queen does an address to the country. It's kind of a big deal. And this year, she was too ill to do it. Mm-hmm. So Charles did it instead. And he sat on a golden throne with a golden hat worth more money than you'll ever see in your life.
Yeah.
Just a hat.
Yeah.
That hat's worth 20 times what I'm ever going to earn in my lifetime. And he was sitting in his golden throne with his gold hat going, times are tough at the moment and we really need to pull together as a nation. And I'm like, fuck you. Sell your hat.
Sell your hat, feed the people.
Exactly. And we're constantly told there's no money for public service, there's no money for hospitals, there's no money for schools, there's no money for fire departments, police departments, yet we're giving a huge amount of money to the Queen and her extended family every year.
Yeah.
And it's just got to go. And I just think more people need to understand quite how much they're fucking us over.
Yeah.
Because they like the delightful nature of it and the archaic nature. Oh, isn't it nice?
The campy version
nature.
of
We get
the
to
monarchy.
go out and wave our little flag when she has a party
Yeah.
or something, And I'm just not for that at all. Because I tell everyone, like, they are our oppressors.
The original hashtag, God Save the Queen.
That's right, yeah. Man, it's crazy. But yeah, it's just, as I said, it's just something we do because we've always done it.
Yeah.
And there's no other reason. It's crazy.
I want to jump back real quick
course,
to the Russian component because the love of your life. When you told me this the other night, I was just taken aback that like just how like real this is for you in your life right now, and like the threat of political persecution for making statements about the authoritarian regime of Russia, right? So I'll let you kind of just go in from there.
So yeah, basically about 3.5 years ago at the Edinburgh Festival, I met a woman, a Russian comedian, and we ended up dating, going out, had a long-term relationship and a long-distance relationship. But we're both comedians, so we both kind of travel a lot.
Yeah.
We kind of know that that's the kind of score that goes in it. And we had talked about getting married in maybe 2 or 3 years and her finally settling in London and us being together. And of course, the war broke out.
Yeah.
And as soon as the war broke out, as I was saying earlier, like many of the artists, she has TV credits. She's openly anti-Putin.
Yeah.
She was openly pro the leader of the opposition, who's currently in prison, of course.
Navalny.
Yeah. So literally the day the war broke out, she just had to flee the country. She had to drop everything and leave. And within a week, they had said that they were no longer going to use the euro or the dollar as a currency within Russia, and also that all international transfers, SWIFT, Visa, MasterCard, were all gone straight away. So she had to just try. They had an app that was built really hastily to help people find banks that had received these final deliveries of euros and dollars, so that people who were leaving could get their money out. And she just had to find one of these, find a cash machine. There were literally people fighting at these cash machines to try and get their cash out. She got about $3,500 out, and the rest of her money was just stolen by the Russian government. It was all just absorbed and lost. And then luckily, we had planned a visit for her to London, so she'd already applied for a tourist visa, but she even had to fly to Cyprus to wait for her British visa to start so that she could come over here, because the threat of persecution, the threat of, as I said, literally being arrested, they now can arrest you and hold you indefinitely for, quote unquote, causing a disturbance. You're not even allowed to refer to the war as a war.
Yeah.
It's a special military operation. They don't even, if you say that Russia is at war with Ukraine, especially if you say it publicly, off to prison.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is immensely oppressive and terrible. But I'd just like to publicly thank Putin for making sure that my girlfriend could come over and live with me.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
So,
yeah,
yeah.
man. I mean, it's just it's a reality that we are so disconnected from in this country at this point in time.
Yes. And the thing is, I'd heard a load of people talk about, I don't like a cashless society. And I like cash because I get paid in cash a lot. So I'm miffed when I go into a place and they won't accept cash. But what happened to the Russians is a great example of why we should not move towards the cashless society, because if all of your cash just belongs digitally in a computer somewhere and they decide to turn that off, then guess what? All your money's gone. So all of a sudden, when the guys are like, fight the cashless society, I'm like, yeah, because I've seen firsthand, like Maria lost, like her life savings effectively overnight, and it's just because it wasn't in physical money. It was in a bank somewhere. Yeah. And then the bank was turned off. The access to it was gone. And then the Russian government just took all of that money. That's why a cashless society is a bad idea.
It's very interesting to also understand that the government just stole.
Yeah, well, during Crimea, they did it as well. They would just take a dividend out of everybody's. Like if you earned over a certain amount of money in a year, they would take it, no questions asked. They'd just take 10% of your earnings that year, and they would use that to fight the wars and pay for the soldiers and stuff. And I'm not saying America would do it. I'm not saying Britain would do it, but they've now been shown that they can do it. Yeah. And if there was something that needed it, that's how they'd justify it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, we there is such a disconnect between the way that we pay our taxes and where that goes into the federal machine, right? At state and local levels, there's some level of traceability, accountability, right? But when money starts flowing up through federal income tax and other federal programs, and it just gets allocated into the Pentagon, into wherever,
you don't know where that's going.
Forget about it, right?
Totally.
And it's and it's just, here's the standard number on your paycheck that you're having the deduction for, right? And there's nothing to do about where that money's going.
We had £13 billion go missing during COVID because. This guy called Rishi Sunak, who is probably going to be the next prime minister, but should instead be in prison. He paid a load of private companies to create apps and stuff like this for COVID, none of which delivered and none of which gave the money back. Yeah. So he built this whole track and trace system, which cost £13 billion. And of course, as soon as the pandemic. Well, the pandemic's not over, but as soon as everyone was back to work, he just went, I'm in charge of the money, we're writing that off. And it's because he didn't want anyone to look at where he'd given, because he'd given it all to his friends. He'd given out £13 billion to his friends. They'd delivered nothing. I'm sure they were kicking straight back to him through the company. It's corrupt as fuck. And it's not even hidden. Yeah.
Well, in the U.S., right, to mirror that in a much greater scale, we had all of the business programs that gave money away to businesses to weather the pandemic. And there were a lot of businesses that were just your mom and pop Main Street businesses who got the money and have used it to weather the storm and all that jazz. And that's one pool of activity. But then there's a pool of activity that is billions and possibly $1 trillion worth of
taken by companies like Amazon and stuff.
They filled out the forms, they took the checks, and then...
Well, a good friend of mine, because we had the furlough system back home, he runs tech companies, and he has 3 or 4 small tech companies that all specialize in different things, mostly sort of cybersecurity. But a lot of the staff that he has for those, they work for all 4 of the companies. So when it came to the furlough forms, he was like, it would be very, very easy for me to fill out 4 of these forms for each of these guys every time. And he said... there will probably be 0 repercussions. He was exactly right. He said there'll probably be 0 repercussions for doing that, but I'm not going to do it because it's massively unethical, you know. As the head of these 4 companies, he could have got 4 furloughs for him and 4 furloughs for anyone who was working remotely for the 4 different companies, you know, because it was all thrown together so quickly. But weirdly, there's a part of me that says if you can abuse that system, then fucking go for it.
Yeah.
Because money's imaginary anyway.
Well, and that is it, right? I mean, the concept of America's power, right, emanates from the fact that we value our land more than we value anybody else's land on this globe, and we control the banks that assign that value to that land.
Yes,
so,
definitely.
That is the game, and you're right. In one instance, if the system is designed poorly and presented to you in a way that you can just absorb from it, then go for it. Like, don't not do that.
I've been saying to people all the time, obviously worldwide we're heading for a recession right now, okay? And everything's price is going up and everything's going up. What people forget all the time is that is entirely imaginary.
Yeah.
What they've gone, oh, guess what? You're going to have 10 years where you're really poor and shit now. And everyone's just gone, all right. No one has gone, wait a minute. Like, let's look at the resources we've got in the world now and the money we've got in the world now and the ability to make things that we have in the world now. Do we still really need to be using this system that's 400 years old?
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to think about a different way of distributing
organizing
this wealth.
our resources.
Yeah, and make it so we don't have to all suffer. Because we only all suffer. You and I are only poor because everybody agrees we're poor.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is it. And the fact that everyone just goes, oh, the economy's bad. And whenever I hear anyone go like, oh, money doesn't grow on trees, it's like you invented money. Money can come from anywhere you want. Money can be whatever you want. And especially when you look at NFTs and digital currency, you can see that money can be represented by almost anything.
The two underpinnings, right, that underpin the confidence in these things, because that's what it is, right? Is this concept of confidence that we apply to these things, right? Is natural capital, the things that we draw from the earth, whether they be rocks, plants, or otherwise, that we wouldn't exist without, and then it's the labor to do so, right? It's those two things, right? And those two things go, everything else
is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to tell you something just before we get back to being a bit silly, because this is something that I read during the lockdown, and I've always thought about this. Do you know about Socrates' idea of the noble lie? So the noble lie is the underpinning of society. He wrote a script called Society, which is where we get the word from, where he outlaid what you need to make societies work. And he said the biggest thing you need is something called the noble lie. And the noble lie is the idea, his idea of it was that you tell every single person that they're born with a type of metal in their blood.
Yeah.
And if they've got bronze in their blood, they're built to be workers. They're built to be servants. They're built to be this. If they've got silver in their blood, they're teachers. They're engineers. And if they've got gold in their blood, they're leaders. Because Socrates said, unless we give these people a reason why they should work, they will never work.
Yeah.
You have to lie to them to make them think that you are better than them for society to work. And every modern society still has the noble lie. We just call it something completely different each time. So in America, it's money. In England, it's the class system. It's always there. I am better than you because I am born better than you.
Yeah.
Everybody has to work except me because I have gold in my blood, And this still, we don't call it gold in your blood anymore. We call it I am the son of a lawyer, so I don't have to have a regular shit job.
Yeah.
But guess what? You are working class, so you have to have a regular shit job, And without that lie, none of these societies work. But the more people realize that it is a lie, the more they'll be able to do it.
So
that's heavy stuff, I know.
Yeah, right. Really get. But I mean, here's the deal, man. These are the type of conversations that we have on this podcast. It is not just the run of the mill interview, whatever, right? This is almost like the antidotal function.
I'm just hoping that this tonally fits what you're doing. If
it absolutely does. Like if we go back to just the previous podcast, episode 106, where I sat down with a gentleman who is like 82 years old, Robert D. Philippus, and he's like a business guy who like worked through the golden era of American industry where, it wasn't always about deliver money to shareholders. It was about that handshake between the consumer and industry and labor, and like that all of this, together is what combined to make a great America, in a sense that everybody got to share in the fruits of success.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Right. And then he went on to talk about Milton Friedman and the transition to this shareholder first economy where all we look at is, who owns it, and who, tithes upward to the person that owns it through their efforts. And that's it.
Yep.
And that's it. Nothing more. So no, this totally fits the tone,
good.
and you're spot on. And it gives a good transition point as well too, right? Because you talk about being born to this, being born to that, and it's the value that's already in my blood because this, that, the other. I want to talk about you and growing up. Did you grow up in London?
I grew up in South London, yeah. So
Okay.
I technically live right on the border. There's next at the bottom of London. There's another county called Surrey. So London kind of stops where the tube line stops. So as soon as you've gone as far down as you can on the Northern Line, that's it. That's the bottom, and then you're 10 minutes drive away from Surrey. But there's this concept of Greater London, which is all the little surrounding commuter belts, all call themselves London. Even though technically they've got maybe a Surrey postcode, but they put themselves...
And I'm sure you've seen that with Chicago specifically.
Exactly, yes.
Right?
Yeah,
where everybody in the surrounding...
So where I grew up is technically a suburb, but we put it in the Greater London category. And the joke is always, if I can use my London bus pass to get there, it's still London. Because they have a different bus pass once you get out past it, So, yeah, you can use your London bus pass to get to where I grew up. And, we had a real, working class upbringing. It's a very interesting thing because my father is a hardcore Tory. And his whole life he has seen the Tories vote against his best interests.
Yeah.
I remind him every single day of his life that we used to live in in a council house.
Yeah.
We had a council house which was paid for by the government, whilst because he was a bobby originally. He was a traditional British policeman in the big tall hat, and my mum didn't work, and bobbies earn fuck all.
Yeah.
So we lived in a council house until I was probably 6 or 7 years old. We had to move out of the council house because the Tory government decided that they weren't going to give council houses to public services anymore. So I always joke when I was a kid, I used to live on the safest street in London because all of the people who lived in that street were policemen, firemen, ambulancemen who didn't have enough money to buy their own house. So they had council housing specifically for them. So my next door neighbour was a policeman. My next door neighbour on the other side was a policeman. A couple of doors down we had a fireman. So it was a whole road just of council people. And then we had to move into a really tiny house, which was not nearly big enough for me and my two brothers, while we could save enough money to finally get what ended up being the family home after that. And it's a double-edged sword because I love my dad very much. He's a wonderful man, but I don't have many memories of him as a child because he just worked. He worked 14 hours a day every day to make sure that we had a house over, a roof over our heads. And I really admire him for that. I think it was a great thing. But yeah, I didn't even realize it's the typical story. I didn't even realize we were struggling or we're poor, And I was so naive for so long.
Yeah.
And it was like when, I think I was 16 and a lot of my friends went to the all boys school, the very posh all boys school. And every single one of them had said to me, oh, my parents, when I was born, they started a little fund for me. So when I'm 16, that it releases all this money and I get to buy a car. I get to maybe go on holiday. And I was so excited because I was like, oh, I'm nearly 16. I can't wait till my trust fund is released, And I said to my parents, oh, it's my 16th birthday soon. I can't wait to see what I'm going to be able to get. Maybe I'll get a car. Maybe I'll get some driving lessons. And they were just like, you're not getting that. I'm like, what? They were like, we did not do that for you because you have two brothers and we had a single income.
Yeah.
And we spent all our money on making sure that you were alive.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's right. So thanks. And I remember being a bit kind of salty about it because all of my friends had all this, they were buying cars and, going on nice fancy foreign holidays, and we just never had access to any of that, I mean, we didn't do a proper foreign holiday until I was maybe 18, 19 years old, just because, we'd do awful little camping trips where everybody hated it.
Yeah.
But we'd never do a proper thing. And it's kind of it's kind of interesting. And when I look back at it, I really think like it's a real blessing that I get to do the sort of job that I do today, because entertainment industries are playgrounds for upper middle class people now. So if you're working class, it's very, very hard to break into these industries, you know. And it taught me a lot of lessons. The thing that I've seen the most is working class people are terrified to ask for money.
Yeah.
Whereas like posh guys with a lot of money talk about money like it's no big thing, because to them it isn't. And if you want to succeed, you have to be able to talk about money in the way that rich people talk about money. So one of the hardest things about doing what I do is I quite often have to find some patrons. And they're not investors, they are patrons.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult conversation, because I have to sit down with them and say, I need X amount of money to make this thing.
Yeah.
And they say, well, what am I going to see in return? And I have to say, well, you get a nice thing that says executive producer
at the end.
At the end of the thing. And you get to tell all of your friends you're a film producer. And they go, oh. You know, because as I said, it's patronage. Patronage, it's not investment. And I remember the first couple of times I had to do it, I absolutely hated myself for doing it, because, as I said, it's just how you're raised. You know, you got to work. You want that money, you got to work.
Yeah.
But of course, the irony is, if you have to work, you can't do the thing that you're doing because you're working all the time. So yeah, finding ways to balance that has always been something that I'm kind of quite proud of. You know, my writing partner is always saying to me, like, where do you find all these guys who'll just give you money to make things? And I'm like, I'm very good at making things.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it ties back in once again to what I was saying about networking and what I was saying about like making sure people do it. And if you have someone who's got the facility, make sure you ask them. You know, don't just ask them casually over a pint. Bring them a really honest outline of exactly what you need and exactly what you're making. Make sure you deliver that product. That's the other thing that's very important. You know, and if they like it, there's a good chance that they will then invest in other arts projects in the future, you know. And those producers, I mean, they make stuff like this happen. Without producers, I wouldn't be able to do most of my tours. I wouldn't be able to do, you know, any of the TV projects I'm doing. They all completely rely on someone with more money than me, with not my level of talent, going, yeah all right then.
Sure.
All right, go on then.
Well, it's interesting to me, the juxtaposition of you know, working class and lack of access in the media space, because the efforts that we have been putting in for years, you know, trying to generate content and entertainment and become something, become acts, become musicians, comedians, and artists, and all sorts of things. There's no one like path just to get there, and so I feel like maybe that is what we are creating here, is this like working class access to media, that like you don't just have to be somebody with a bunch of money and a bunch of status to be able to get yourself to the next step in your career.
And I think stuff like this for local communities is absolutely great.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you try and go into any of the arts, what you're always met with is, oh, you shouldn't do this. You're never going to succeed. Do you know how hard it is to do that? Do you know how difficult your life is going to be? And when you've got somewhere like this where you're like, okay, you're new to this, but here's what this is going to be like. Do it, then it's just much better for everyone. I mean, people ask me all the time, like, how do you get to do what you do? And I tell them a lot, you know, I tell them from my own experience what it is that I've done. But then I say, you know, other people I've spoken to who are the next couple of steps up from me, their experience of it is vastly different. Their way in was very different. And I always say to people, the most important thing to remember, if you want to be rich, be a banker. If you want to be famous, be a serial killer. If you want to be rich and famous, definitely do not go into the arts, because 99.997% of people in the arts are just working. You know, if I can maintain my life as a working and touring club comic, I'm going to be the happiest boy in the world, because I love it. You know, obviously I want bigger things. I want to make other things. I want to do, I mean, TV writing's kind of one of the big goals right now. You know, I really want to do this stuff, but if this is all I get out of this, then I'm more than happy with that. And I think the big problem with people who want to get into the arts is they see the arts as being like Leonardo DiCaprio and Metallica, and that's success. But I think success is just being able to consistently do it. If I can make like 70% of my crazy ideas into things, then that's a fucking great hit rate. That's really good.
Yeah.
And once you've made the thing, it's there forever. So people discover things all the time, you know.
Yeah.
And it sounds really poncy, but the work is the reward. You know, once the thing exists that you've just kind of willed into existence, that's fucking brilliant. What a brilliant thing. And that's what I say to people all the time. Focus on making the things, don't focus on selling the thing. You know, because if the thing's good enough, the sales pitch will be easy. You know, you don't have to worry about that bit afterwards. But, like, make sure the thing is good and make sure you're doing the thing for the right reason. I mean, I do this sort of lifestyle because I genuinely couldn't imagine myself doing anything else. There's a song by Clutch, which I really like, and the line is, doctor or lawyer, I'll never be. The life of a drifter, the only life for me. You know? And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of it, you know. I call myself the arts gadabout, and I think that kind of sums it up very nicely, you know. Because I just like traveling and making people laugh and playing music, you know. And if I get to do those things with my life, then that's a success, you know.
Well, I'm appreciative that you've allowed us in our little old home to be part of that success.
It's my pleasure. I'd love just to say before we finish that this genuinely, I don't joke when I say this is one of my favorite towns in all of America. I genuinely love it here. So much so that I even wrote a little EP about this town, or based on my experience in this town.
That's right.
Which is just called Carbondale, which you can find online. And speaking of finding me online,
go for it.
Sam Rhodes Comedy Explosion is what all of my stuff is under. I've got a special on Amazon that we shot here when I was here last time.
Is that globally accessible now?
It's globally accessible. I believe so, yeah, because I've had some Americans say they found it. So hopefully so.
Americanarama.
Americanarama is the first special. This new one is going to be called The Colossus of Rhodes. And it's going to be out before the end of this year. And it was shot at the beautiful Liberty Theatre around the corner. Support the local arts. Support Nathan and all the wonderful work he does. And yeah, genuinely, guys like him are what make the entertainment industries work. So you've got to be happy that you've got Nathan in this town. I'll tell you that for a fact.
Yeah, that's crazy. Thank you. That makes me feel. I'm really bad at taking praise. I'm really bad at taking praise. But I'm really good at every now and then putting a podcast together. This one being the 107th episode of the WTF Carbondale podcast, where we hope that you have taken another good bit of working knowledge of another interesting person with a deep tie to Carbondale. You know, away for you, away with them, whatever. I'm getting lost in my words. Have a good one, folks. Whatever that one may be.